set up.
Okay, so it's cool now.
Yeah. Very
Okay.
good. Okay, you have 10 minutes.
Okay, so today we are going to talk about manifold reconstruction using linear approximations. And we look at the trajectories of a few particles here. These particles are denoted by different colors. And we assume that the track finding has been done. So the number of particles here is very large, about 10,000. But the number of hits per particle is actually very small, which is about 10, which makes the reconstruction of this trajectory challenging because of the low number of hits. And also because the trajectory of these particles is not precisely helical because of the experimental limitations, as we know. And for input, for most of the algorithms, we know that this helical information is provided as an input. So we claim that we can actually reconstruct these trajectories using linear fits. And the rest of the presentation would focus on how this linear approximation is valid, or I mean, how it can be used, basically just an idea of it. So to get the idea, we consider a very simple toy example. We consider a semicircle, which we denoted by M, and we consider some anchor points, which are close to it, and we call them AI. And then we compute the distances of a representative point with these anchor points, and we call these distances DI. Now, we consider the map, and let's say R is a point on M. So R to D1 squared to D6 squared, which is basically the square distances. And then we embed this semicircle in a three-dimensional space by taking the three maximum values of DI. And the different colors indicate that which part of the semicircle has been mapped where. The important takeaway point from this is that we can warp the semicircle into something that is close to being flat, so that we can approximate it by linear methods. So this idea, which is from a toy example, can be generalized to an m-dimensional manifold in an n-dimensional space, like manifold of any intrinsic dimension to and any codimension. So right now this is a one-dimensional curve in a two-dimensional space. We don't go to the mathematical machineries behind this justification, but we do explain, or like basically sketch through the three theorems that should be that is proved in order to establish this result. The first one is a geometric result, which says that under certain assumptions on the sectional curvature of M, and under certain assumptions on the locations of this constellation of anchor points, we can have this map, which is a function of the square distances, so that the image of this curvature, in the image of this map, the curvature is lowered. The second one is a statistical one, is that if we are given a point cloud data, then under certain sampling assumptions on this data, the warped representation of this point cloud can be represented by a degree 1 regression. In other words, we can just find the tangent in the image, and if it's a curve, or a tangent space if it's a manifold. And then when we take back these points to the actual point cloud, that the inverse is proved to be unique, and the output of this algorithm has to be smooth, that it's a smooth manifold. So the application of this work, the first application of this work is in denoising. So there is a well-known recent algorithm called MMLS, manifold moving least squares, which actually approximates data from a cloud, but it's a polynomial regression. So you have to feed into the algorithm what is the polynomial. So one way to think about it is that we can use this flattening strategy and use it with the degree 1 regression of MMLS. So basically we do a degree 1 regression after taking this into a new space, a new higher dimensional space. And we show the experiments on some simple examples. First is a helix, that's what we were talking about. And these are 400 sample points, and the blue points are the input in this algorithm. The green point, the green curve is the ground truth, and the red one is the output, excuse me, from the algorithm. And as we can see that the difference between the output and with the ground truth is very less, and it is comparable to known polynomial algorithms. The second example that we see is a slightly bit more complicated than the first one, but nevertheless it is very useful when data has a lower dimensional representation, and where we consider a 10-dimensional symmetric matrix, which is of the form UDU transpose, and we want to approximate the spectra of this matrix. So this matrix has two leading eigenvalues. We column stake this matrix so that this becomes an element in a 100-dimensional space, and each of the coordinate is then cubed. Thus, we have a two-dimensional because it has two leading eigenvalues, a non-linear, it has been cubed, some manifold in R100. So this is the original spectra of this manifold, of this matrix, and the orange ones indicate the leading eigenvalues. The blue line is the spectra, and on the right-hand side you can see the noisy spectra after we add an additive uniform noise. And then we reconstruct it simply by linear methods. So this is the success of this method because this was explicitly nonlinear. And the sample size was about 2,000 matrices. And then the tail energy that we compute, which theoretically should be zero, because it's a measure of the residual eigenvalues, that is found to be very close to zero. So the takeaway point from this idea is that for certain collection of anchor points AI, I can always map to a higher dimensional space using the distance functions with these anchor points so that the curvature is lowered and the linear approximation can be employed, and it can find applications in denoising, as we saw, in reconstruction of curves and manifolds, and generally any problem where either the polynomial is not known or we want to find out the polynomial that cannot be theoretically derived. And this is the same strategy we applied to construct these trajectories. And we did not apply MMLS here, but a simple linear sampling to get the interpolation. So the references for this work are in, the announcement of this work has been in this conference paper. The second one is the thesis of Barak Sober, which talks about MMLS. And the third one, which should be soon into archive, describes the theorems that are proved in order to establish this machinery. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
Let me ask one question. Panchali, can you go back to the slide, your denoising slide? I think it's slide 9. Yeah, yes. Yeah, like 8 and 9 this series. So, this looks like, from my point of view, that there's quite some, let's say, approximate or close by noise, which then is filtered to be, let's say, if I look at this series, I see already some structure in the first one, and then it's almost, I don't know, a kneeling step towards coming to the trajectory at the end.
Yes.
Is that really applicable at one-to-one to our to the TrackML problem, where practically?
Okay, so one thing I want to say is that in this algorithm or in the strategy I described, one has to say the intrinsic dimension of the manifold. So in case if you're reconstructing a helix, the intrinsic dimension is 1. So you have to input that.
Right.
And the assumption is that this is a perturbation from a one-dimensional manifold, and the perturbation and the noise is bounded. that the proof in the proof, you would see that the assumption of the noise being bounded, that is a requirement.
Yeah, and that, to understand it correctly, sorry, this is really difficult to grasp in my head. To understand it correctly, that the fact that the noise is bounded, that is necessary in the sequence that you can end up at this last regression point.
Yes.
Right. Very interesting.
And also there are some sampling assumptions or sectional curvature assumptions. For example, you cannot take a manifold that has a figure 8 shape, like it intersects to each other,
right,
with each other. So those sort of manifolds are not applicable.
And that would be because they have they have not, there's no continuous, they have polar.
It's not an embedding actually.
Yeah.
So
it's not they have polar points which are not part of an embedded manifold.
Yes. So those are the
right.
Places where it won't work.
Interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, Panchali, for also persevering your
and thank you very much for rescheduling
network problems. So I'm glad this worked out.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're done. Unless the other speaker showed up, but I didn't see anybody join, so I think we're done.
Okay.
Very good. These should all be up on the website tomorrow, sometime.
Okay, and the discussion will be on next week.
Right, exactly. And I'll get back to the speakers about discussions with more firm information tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Talk to you next week.
Yes, bye.
Thank you, bye.
Bye.
Bye.